Well, last time I had the pleasure of interviewing you, we went deeply into the story of PowerPoint and forethought, and I wanted to talk to you about some of your experiences with some of your other investments. But before that, I realized last time we hadn't really talked about your profession as such. So I wanted to, if we could, I thought we could start with talking a little bit about venture capital in the 1970s, and then move into some of your new enterprise investments over time.
Okay, sure.
So I wonder if you could tell us about just what the landscape of venture capital was like in Silicon Valley in the 1970s in terms of your greatest rivals, maybe your partners, people you worked with, different types of venture investors, and themes in their investing. If you could just paint us a picture, if you will.
I came to San Francisco and environs of Silicon Valley from Boston in 1969 as a partner with Arthur Rock.
Right.
And he and I had a 7-year partnership, and in '69 it was like 99. It was the peak.
Okay.
And suddenly we dropped into a horrible 10-year period. And in fact, I think in '74, one technology company went public.
Wow.
And that was it. And so we raised $10 million from the likes of Gordon Moore and Bob Noyce and Alex Zaffaroni and Henry Singleton and Jay Last and a very distinguished group of limited partners. I brought in about a third of them, and Arthur brought in 2/3. And I was a 1/3 partner, he was a 2/3 partner. And Intel had just been formed the prior year, 1968. Right. And what we learned, we raised $10 million, and we never invested $10 million. We invested around 6.25 because it was such an awful time. But we distributed around $40 million. So it was a very good outcome, and it was a period of time that was characterized by survival. Stay alive and play for a good outcome. And most of those companies were private and were acquired.
Okay.
Because that was the time period where that happened. I would say that the environment in this area was an old boys club. And some people liked Arthur and some people hated him. That was the way it was, which I didn't actually totally appreciate when I was coming from Boston.
Oh, that there was that.
The schism.
I see.
And so Arthur wasn't a member of the old boys club. And because he was, first of all, he was his own man. He had his own precepts. He had come out to California from New York with the organization of what became Fairchild Camera and Instrument.
Right.
Fairchild Semiconductor, which was really a foundation of the semiconductor business in Silicon Valley. And he's not extremely a gregarious guy. And so I found that to be acceptable way of doing things. I learned a lot from Arthur. Arthur's a very intelligent guy. And so at the end of that time period, and that was during the period where it was, the United States was in very shaky form, economically as well as militarily, and we were at the end of the Vietnam War.
Right.
Nixon resigned in the middle of it. Inflation was in the high double digits, and in the high, that is up to 20%.
Right.
And interest rates were equally high. It was a very uncertain time. So our partnership ended in 1977, and we talked about forming a second partnership. I really wanted to grow as an individual and grow the partnership, and Arthur really didn't want to do that. So we officed together for a few years. In that time, I investigated a number of alternatives, including teaming up with Tom Perkins, and Bill Hambrecht was another one, and so on. We had very good engagements and discussions. And at the end of the time, I elected to join two fellows from the East Coast and form the first bicoastal venture firm, actually. And our first limited partner was T. Rowe Price in Baltimore, Maryland. And my two partners were Frank Bonsall, who had been with Alex Brown, and Chuck Newhall, who had been with T. Rowe Price, and whose father had been with Lawrence Rockefeller. And he was very involved in the, he knew a lot about the venture business, put it that way. And the name New Enterprise Associates, which we adopted as a name, had been dreamed up by General Dorio originally at American Research and Development, and he gave permission to use that name to Chuck. It was very
nice
wonderful
of
of him to do it. I knew General Dorio as well, and thought the world of him. He was a great man. He brought the spirit of the venture business foremost into sort of the American public's understanding, because AR&D was a publicly held company, and that he headed up. So we were at the tail end of this very difficult time economically, and the venture business had been really going through some hard times itself, because there were no exits to speak of, very few. And so we organized the firm, and well, before that happened, Arthur and I individually made investments in Apple Computer. I spent a good part of 1977 investigating the entire PC industry, because it was just being born, and spent a lot of time hanging out and with people, and got to be totally acquainted and familiarized with the what I thought were attractive aspects of it, because I thought we were going to another whole technology wave. So when we organized, so that investment was made in November of 1977. I wanted to have NEA consider that as its first investment, but the amount of money, in my partner's points of view, was too small.
Oh.
So, I mean,
yeah. At
anyway,
that time,
so I invested in it myself, and that was before the partnership was formed. We started trying to raise funds in January of 1978, and we closed on, our goal was 15 million, and we closed on 16.4 million in June of 1978. And so I was the Lone Ranger out here, and Chuck and Frank were in the East Coast. We've subsequently moved the East Coast office to Washington, D.C., where it is today.
Okay.
And we have, and NEA has a staff office in outside of Washington, which serves as where we have all our financial information.
Oh.
And we run all the back office duties. We have our legal team there, and so it's this whole idea of a bicoastal approach. While it wasn't easy, it's stretched us to the point where it served us extremely well. And so, and when we formed NEA in the first place, we were very familiar with a lot of companies on both coasts, because there was not much funding going on. And we said, why don't we just either invest in some of the portfolio companies that each of us had been involved in before, that Arthur and I had been involved in, or on the East Coast where Frank had been involved in, or Chuck. So we did that, and then in November of 1978, the tax laws changed regarding capital gains. There was a congressman from Wisconsin who introduced lower capital gains taxes.
Okay.
And that sparked a little bit, and then in the following year, early '79, February of '79, the Congress passed a law in enabling pension plans to invest in alternative asset classes.
Okay.
So other than just publicly traded stocks and bonds,
Right.
you could do private investments. That was really engineered by a group of individual VCs who deserve a lot of credit. Reed Dennis and David Morgan-Thaler, prominent among them, and I think Bill Draper played a role in that as well. So that changed everything. And what it really affected were publicly held stocks and the new issue market, because not long after that was when Ronald Reagan came into office, and the tide had begun to turn. Just before that, we peaked out thanks to Mr. Volcker, and he tamed the beast, inflation, and we really, and the country was off and running again. And it turns out that these investments that we'd made in NEA1 just sprinted ahead. So we wound up distributing a few years later $62 million on 16.4.
Wow.
And everybody thought that we were a really good team.
May I ask
Yeah.
if that was it concentrating in personal computing, that area in that first NEA fund?
It certainly helped a great deal, and the byproduct of that was software.
Right.
And then another aspect of it was networking.
Okay.
And last time we talked a little about the
Absolutely.
birth of ThreeCom. I'm proud to say where we stand today. Just to go to the very end, we now have $17 billion in committed capital and 15 partnerships. I was the managing partner for the first 20 years, and during that time we had a compound rate of internal rate of return net to the limited partners after all costs, including fees, of 41.4% per year. That covers 7 partnerships. So we had a good team of people, and we founded the strategies that we still pursue today. That is, we have the med and the tech teams. Med team has 4 subunits. The tech team has 5 or 6. Med team has biopharma, biotechnology, instrumentation, and services. And then we have the typical ones in the tech side. We had a series of good people, and we made minor alterations along the way, but we never, in fact, to this day, we've never lost a person who we didn't feel could do better somewhere else. And we had one person retire, Peter Morris, and he was concerned more about his family than anything else. He retired as a young man. His father had died at 56, and he didn't want to have the same experience. He didn't know how long he was going to live. He's healthy as can be, and he's doing really well, and he's still a venture partner of ours, although we don't see enough of him. He's a wonderful guy. And the other thing that's happened, in an overview point of view, is that we decided in the year 2000, I had some good estate planning advice at that time, and we had gone from a 25% carry, paying back all the fees, by the way, before we make any distributions to ourselves. We had 99.1 to the limited partners, general partners, then paying back the fees on top of that. So principal first, fees second. And then we'd split, the big balance was 25 points to us and 75 to the LPs. And we had a great run. And it was at that point we were changing our strategies, because we were always one of the larger funds. When NEA2, we were shooting for 25 million, we wound up with 45. NEA3, we were looking for 100. We wound up with 125. NEA 4 was 225 million, I think. We were looking for 200. NEA 5 was, I think it was around 320 million. NEA 6 was 465 million. NEA 7 was 500 million, something like that. And so in the year 2000, we went to market in March. The year 2000, we were looking to raise 1.5 billion, and we raised 2.3 billion. We couldn't really turn it off. And we didn't close until September.
Wow.
So the good news was that we only invested a little bit of it under what happened prior to the meltdown.
Yeah.
In 2000, and most of it was invested after that. And then we NEA, we rethought our metrics in NEA 11, and we said maybe we shouldn't really raise $1 billion fund, and we said, well, we thought we could do it, so we raised 1.1 billion, and then NEA 12 was 2.5, NEA 13 was 2.5, NEA 14 was 2.5, NEA 15 was 2.8 plus $300 million in a sidecar fund for people who wanted to invest alongside us in specific companies. So it was 3.1. So that gets you to the 17 billion. Yeah. And we've made distributions all along the way in equally large amounts. And in the year, the thing I was going to focus on was that in the year 2000, we put into place real teeth in our management company. Most equity funds, private equity, venture funds really use the management management company as just a pass-through. We decided to we had started in 1978 with the goal of building a 100-year partnership. And it's very difficult to think in those terms because, these are, in our case, 12-year partnerships with 3 optional 1-year additions to that. Still, it's short. Most companies have a hard time maturing in 12 years, much less 10 years.
Right.
And so you have to think in terms of decades. That got us to thinking about our plan as we got into this $1 billion plus category. And so what we did, at that point, we went to 30 points of carry from 25, and only were 3 or 4 firms that had 30 points of carry. And we felt that we couldn't earn it without good performance, obviously. But we said for our own well-being, we were doing fine on 25 points. So we decided to think about our limited partners and about the long term. So we took that other 5 points and we put it into the management company with the idea that we wanted, first of all and most often, thinking about the limited partners, to think about continuity. And if you raise money every 3.5 years or so and turnover is, they're what I call the hit and run people, where they get one hit and they think they're geniuses. And they go start their own fund. It gets to be a proliferation of funds and people. And if you're a limited partner of a fund where some people who had good performance leave at the end of that fund, and they're still, 5 or 7 years running on that fund, who's going to mind the store?
Right.
And we said, and I was actually inspired, it's a funny word, but I was inspired to think that way because when I saw Vinod Khosla leave Kleiner, I said to myself, why is that? And what I came up with was, there's nothing to keep him there. I don't know what went on at Kleiner that led to that, and it doesn't make any difference. But I said, we can't let that happen to NEA. We have very talented people. We have a lot of responsibility to our limited partners. And we work for them. We work for the limited partners. We work really for our companies. So we have to find a way of bridging this gap. So we thought if we raise these larger funds, given that extra 5 points, it's going to build up to being quite a bit of capital over a long run. We can use it in a number of ways. Most often, what we can do is provide an ultimate career path for everybody at the firm. So we're selective about bringing our general partners over the hurdle into being members of the management company as well. And we used a formulaic approach for that. We picked out, I think, 6 of us, and sort of compiled the carries that they had had in the prior funds to get relative merit and how we stood, and allocated the interests accordingly. It's been fabulous. And we can take our time paying us out, because just like like these large funds take a longer time, it's tailor-made for our size fund and for the time it takes and for how to keep people engaged and excited about the firm. So it's been a great development, and I don't know if anybody else does it.
That's
But
fascinating.
and the other and another milestone of our firm from the very beginning, in addition to this, to having 2 teams with a great, and much experience and knowledge, hands-on as we could in those 2 areas of activity. Another thing we did was treat everybody equally. We thought, here I was a lone ranger here, and I had 2 partners in the East Coast where cost of living is 2/3 of what it is out here, or more exaggerated than that even. I said, let's everybody draw the same draw, because we're going to pay it back anyway. So we're goal aligned with our limited partners. We wanted to, have as little go in the way of salaries for us as possible, so that it wouldn't take so much to pay them back before we entered the fee range. Right. Earned carry. And that's why we feel so strongly about the value of carry in our particular field, because people, if they are fair with their limited partners, they're going to keep their fees to a minimum and never pretend to make any wealth from your fees. You only earn money when the limited partners earn money.
That's how you can align the interests.
That's right.
Perfectly.
So goal alignment was always one of our first and foremost. Transparency and goal alignment were 2 keystones. And that really fit into this idea of paying everybody the same. So we call it a draw. We'd have the same draw, and as everybody else, we have the managing partner has a modest 15%, which is virtually nothing. Just to give somebody the responsibility to answer questions from the limited partners. So we could focus that question on it. And at the end, so it worked out beautifully, and that 5 points went into that, and I'm the chairman of the management company, and I go to the Monday meetings, and I am on 7 boards for NEA, but I'm no longer a general partner. So I started another small activity that doesn't conflict with NEA. And I advise them anytime I see something that is up the alley of NEA. So I have a very active and constructive relationship with the entire firm, and it's great. And we have 2 offices in India and 2 offices in China, and these 2 main offices in the U.S. We're thinking of doing something in Israel. We have made a couple of investments there, and we have some other investments in Europe, but those have been, week trips, if you will.
Right.
So, so it was Benchmark came along, and actually, without knowing our model, they did the same thing.
Oh,
which is they treated everybody the same. I think it's a first-class way of doing things.
It makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah,
to hear you
and then as
explain.
people come in, they come in as interns or assistants, and then they became partners, and then general partners. So we tried to keep a very flat organization. So in the meantime, we've seen firms evolve. Some have evolved better than others. A lot has to do with the hierarchy in the firms. I find, and I won't name any names because it's useless to do so. And but everybody knows that some people want to dominate things and control things, and if you're in that sort of frame of mind, you don't belong at NEA. In our case, we're a team. We've always been a team. We have leadership, and we have people we look to for leadership within our own organization, but we're team members.
Okay.
And that's the way we play the game. And so I think we have a model that can last forever because we're not dependent completely on our next fund. We have, right now we have, in active funds, we have 5.
Is that because of the management company that doesn't make you dependent?
It's one aspect of it.
Okay.
We now have and we have an independent party, Duff and Phelps, values the management company each year, so that we have a basis for treating the partners who are retiring we convert their interest from equity to debt. And then we pay them out accordingly over a period of time. We ask for flexibility on their part, on the retiring partner's part, so that we never get ourselves, in a contractual bind, so where we can't afford to pay them.
Right.
And so we don't pay on a prefixed schedule. We ask for teamwork on the way out as well as teamwork on the way in. So that's it. So and I'd say that the business has gotten pretty professional.
Yeah.
And I have half a dozen firms that I hold in very high esteem above others, but I am not fixed on this. I just keep my eyes open, and I can see comers and goers, and I applaud the comers. My basic philosophy is I'm for the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I regard myself as first and foremost an entrepreneur. I come from a line of entrepreneurs. I had my grandfather, my father, all entrepreneurs. They all did well, but we never believed in spoiling our children or taking away their energy and their drive to do something on their own, become as expert as they can possibly be in what they're doing. And that's the way I've treated my own children. And they know this is not a handout. We want them to. My father used to say, I want you to know, Dick, that you'll never go bankrupt with me as your father. I'm your banker of last resort, but I expect to be repaid. So that's the way I've treated our own offspring. So I think that's the philosophy of NEA, and we find ourselves in an ever-changing institutional environment. The limited partners have gotten very wise, and they, I think, understand how to rank people and look at them over the long term. I think this idea of continuity is a very big thing with limited partners, and they want to know that you're going to be here tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, and the day after that.
Right.
So that's the way I look at it.
There's any number of interesting things in what you just said. A couple that occurred to me. I had noticed this tremendous growth in the size of the partnerships,
right,
from one to the next, and including, I believe, some, if not the largest, partnerships raised in venture capital.
I think we're the largest now.
I wondered what advantage there was. Maybe it's just because I'm not wise enough to recognize it. Is there a natural advantage in making them ever larger? Because I could also see, well, perhaps that would bring with it difficulties as they became larger and larger.
You're dealing with something that's very central in asking that question. So one thing I personally cannot stand is bureaucracy. And I think that feeling is shared by all in our firm. So we have tried to avoid the rigor mortis of a bureaucracy. And So what we've done is modify our approach to the venture business in the following way. We are what we call geographically geographically independent.
Mm-hmm.
We are stage independent. We have the largest seed fund in the country. We are actually, in terms of our stage of what I mean by stage of development.
Right.
We have we have growth activity. We do it all under one framework, and we have teams within the team that handle these things. We asked ourselves, we asked some of our companies that we invest in, who's really doing good work and who's making really good investments now, and how many people does it take to make a decision? What we found out is under certain circumstances the answer is 4. And we said, all right, we can make a decision based upon the following parameters, following metrics, by 4 people. 4 general partners. We have 11 general partners now.
Okay.
Covering these 2 basic teams. And we did a little bit of investing in the energy area, and we said, really, that's not our thing. So we didn't do any more of that. We actually had 2 really great companies that are coming out of that. One is, these are not public yet, but we think they both are great. One is Bloom Energy, the other is Tri-Alpha Energy.
I've heard of Bloom.
I'll tell you a little about both of them. So, we said, all right, we've learned something. So the geography, we can invest really East Coast, West Coast, Europe, Asia, and India and China. And we have trusted teams in all these places. And we can invest in everything from growth capital to seed capital and in between. We have up to $3 million. We consider that an experiment. And we think we've studied where most losses take place. Most losses take place when you have a large amount of money, vested in a company that doesn't have its scale properly understood, its business model properly understood, or perhaps the right management, or perhaps even in the product line not well understood. So we try to limit, to some extent, internally, the amount of funds we expose to loss.
Right.
And we found our loss ratio in terms of dollars lost per partnership has radically been reduced, even with those great returns that we had in the beginning, because they were smaller partnerships and we could get home runs and make the losses somewhat irrelevant.
But in a bigger fund, the losses become more of a factor.
More of a factor.
I get it.
Exactly. So we've adjusted our thinking accordingly. So we have to make agile decisions. That is, we let everybody, we always make decisions in full view of everybody. That is, we only make decisions on Monday. We only spend money on Monday. And the whole partnership understands it. We don't want any partners who are in the woods about what's going on at the firm.
Right.
It includes all the interns, includes everybody. And the 11 general partners are the ones who have the final say on what goes on partnership. So we found that we can think small and be big and think small.
Interesting. And just so I know that I'm understanding correctly, so you're saying with the losses, it's less on those, what for you is an experimental level of investment, these smaller investments, which I take it would be mostly the earlier stage investments would be smaller.
Right. You
have overall a less exposure to loss than maybe making an investment in an established firm that's, there's something not quite clicking there.
Right.
That's where you can really lose
we
a
don't
bundle.
really, we have a reputation for staying with our companies and to a fault perhaps. But usually those are companies that are well understood, and we think they just take longer. Some take longer. And so we try to calibrate the capital and the longevity individually by company.
It's interesting. It just occurs to me that perhaps you'll hear about Wall Street analysts and having always the short-term expectation for the performance of firms. But it was just occurred to me that for you and maybe others in the venture business, it allows you to have a much longer term time scale.
Right. I don't trade. I don't trade, never traded securities.
How about that?
I actually don't play in the public markets. Just don't do it. I really try to just concentrate on what we're really doing on the fundamentals and working with good people.
I'm wondering, you mentioned the change in the law that allowed pension funds and maybe other institutions to participate in venture capital, invest in as limited partners in these partnerships. Did that become, and I imagine that prior to that time it was wealthy individuals who would be investing as limited partners.
Mostly, yes.
Has that proportion changed? Has it become now mostly institutional limited partners and individuals as a minority? I wonder just how that.
Yes, very much so. We have we have some of our partners that were in NEA 1 who are still limited partners, which is great, individuals. And but for the most part, it's become dominated by institutions. And they usually have a large, set of responsibilities in colleges and endowments, pension funds, state pension funds have become very professional, and they know what questions to ask, and they have an excellent track record on they have access to all the track records of people in our world, and so they want people who are going to be consistently top decile or top quartile.
Right.
And you just have to be ready to put your suit on and play the game. It's still fun.
Simple as that.
It's still fun, but it's hard work. It takes a long time
to develop those.
All these characteristics. It takes a long time to put a sizable amount of capital to work. We've been involved in over 1,000 companies.
Right.
I know every one of them. I mean, for better or worse, I know every one of them. And I wasn't involved in no more than a normal amount. But we have long memories, and if you're in a partnership, you can't be any secrets. And so people have to play the game that way. And but to answer your question, is this an advantage or disadvantage? I'd say I couldn't answer that question. I think how you employ your resources is the most important thing. And a small firm can do a good job or a bad job, and a big firm can do a good job or a bad job.
Right. So
I don't think it makes any difference. I think in our case, we want to have great people, and we want to make sure that all the principles we started with are still abundantly clear.
Maybe it makes the scale makes more sense given your ambition for a 100-year partnership.
That's exactly right. Most people have me hear that and they think it's just an aphorism. We meant it. And we're 38 years into it.
Approaching the halfway point.
Yeah, that's it. So that's my view of the business, and I think that as I said, I'm for anybody who does a good job for the entrepreneur. That's why I embrace change. I'm not afraid of it.
One thing that I was really intrigued by in the NEA story is that the bicoastal, the geographic diversity, because it strikes me that it's my impression, and I wonder if you think it's right, that whether it's medical, life sciences, that part of the world, or the digital technology, for lack of a catch term, that it's very geographically lumpy. It's in these different clusters, these places. Boston,
Seattle.
Virginia, Seattle,
Texas.
Right. And is there then a corresponding kind of lumpiness of venture capital, people doing venture capital in those same exact places? And I wonder if you could tell me about what those places are.
Yeah, supply and demand is local. That's what I would say. Yeah. It's so the most Silicon Valley is about 50% of the venture
of the
world.
whole.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. That's what it was last year.
Wow.
It's I would say it ranges between 35 and 50%. And then the Middle Atlantic, Boston is second. Middle Atlantic is up there somewhere. That would be anything from Atlanta to New York has become quite prominent in the venture business. Mm-hmm. And there are some very good consumer-based firms in New York, and other firms as well. Seattle is a very good place. Austin, Texas is great. Dallas is pretty good. San Diego has its own biotech coterie.
Right.
Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
Chicago to some extent. Those are about the places.
Is it similar? I mean, I can just hear it in the places where you have your non-U.S. offices. It's these, although I don't hear Europe in there, which is fascinating to me, but certainly India, China, you think of those as centers of high-tech. Israel,
I thought you were talking just U.S., but...
Well, no, I was talking U.S.,
Yeah.
but now that I think if you can, zoom out, and it's
zoom out,
worldwide too.
Well, for the first time, and I make a point of traveling a lot. For the first time, the UK has a chance to set itself apart from Europe, continental Europe, as in a superior way. UK does. And I think it's because they've graduated beyond the private equity being a family-dominated situation to more institutional and upstart companies that have a lot of good technology in the UK, and it's beginning to be employed in a traditional U.S. manner. Europe has its strong points, and Sweden is a good example. They have a lot more than you'd think.
Yeah,
in Sweden,
right.
Very entrepreneurial drive in Sweden, and Germany, of course, has always been technically excellent, but they have this guilt Schadenfreude idea of where you can't fail. Because you fail, you're sort of banned for life. I mean, that's
right.
Not a good thing to have as a part of the culture, but that is the way it is. Israel is dynamite.
Amazing.
Yeah, amazing, and a lot of the companies come here from Israel. In China, we lived in China for 2008 and half of 2009, because I wanted to get on the ground floor understanding of what really made it tick. And China is it's a nation of entrepreneurs, and it'll play out over time. And they're just beginning to, put a saddle on the beast. Their government is regulating they don't know exactly how to regulate the securities business.
Oh, we've just seen that.
So they're lurching ahead. And India is largely dominated by 40 families.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
It's actually almost 50% of their gross domestic product are controlled by 40 families.
Oh my Lord.
It's amazing. And it's going to take a long time before that changes. So there is an inbred practice over there of teaming with the Tatas and the others.
Right.
And so you have to, there are rarely rare occasions where a new family comes up, and There have been a few examples of that in the last 20 years, but not too many.
Hmm.
So, and then I think elsewhere, it's spotty, but there are obviously entrepreneurial things going on in places like South Africa or Poland and
Right.
things like that. But those are the main ones I've mentioned.
Well, maybe I could, I was curious. One question I neglected to ask you last time was, what was your first, I'm interested in the kind of emergence of software as an industry, as a category
Right.
in and of itself, because it's become so incredibly important and has changed in so many ways today. I was curious what your first, software investment was in venture capital, either with Arthur Rock or with NEA.
Let me think. I think actually the first pure software investment was called Software Publishing Company.
Okay.
Pretty good firm. Had a good run. Didn't make the transition in management, but was good for 10 years.
And that was that the company that then became?
It was right on this road.
VisiCorp or something? Was that?
No.
Was that them, or that was called Personal Software?
Personal Software,
okay.
right.
Software Publishing, they produced something that was presentation software. Did they make Harvard?
No, they didn't make it here.
No, I'm confused
No,
about who they are.
It was a software. It was publishing, and we talked about ThreeCom. ThreeCom was a software company.
Really?
Really, what it was. It was really a networking. It was networking software.
That's
It
interesting.
really was the driver.
Huh.
I mean, they used hardware the same way Apple used hardware, but Apple had a lot of software in it.
Yeah.
And so they, over time, it became identified in different ways.
I guess thinking forward to Silicon Graphics, in a way, that's software, initially software kind of embodied in the chip.
That's
if
right,
you will.
exactly what it was. So then, subsequently we have, at NEA, our largest practices in SaaS, software as a service.
I saw that.
I mean, we have over 20% of our companies are in that area, and at least as a bedrock, and then they expand from there. So we have an awful lot of software, and we have an awful lot of great number of operating people who had software backgrounds. Scott Sandell was at Microsoft.
Who's working with?
He's the new managing partner.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
He's superior. He's been with us 17 years. He embodies every characteristic that I just had mentioned in how we tried to form the firm.
It's interesting.
So we're on our third managing general partner now.
So there was somebody in between you
Peter
and
Barris. Okay. Peter had been at General Electric. He was president of a software company, and joined us on the East Coast, Washington.
That strikes me as probably more stable leadership than other places in the
I think so.
in the venture business.
Yeah, we're in our third generation, and we just hand the keys, and then become either a general partner or stop, one of the two.
Well, it seems to me that over the course of your investing in software, it goes from a period where, in the earliest period, kind of hardware and software come together in a package, to then there's software as a product that you can publish and sell, almost like packaged software, and then it's turned again to now software is something that you just pay, the software as a service, or it's something you're just paying for its use.
That's
I guess.
Exactly, and you move from a license to a subscription base.
Yeah, I can see that in my own personal experience. You know,
Right.
what's happened with my
Right.
productivity software. You know,
Right.
now I'm just a
You talked about
renter.
PowerPoint. PowerPoint's totally software.
Yeah.
That was the first software presentation product, actually, if you want to put it in those terms.
Right.
That's what I loved about it, by the way.
Was with the graphics theme
Right.
of it.
Use of software and graphics to transform a particular activity.
I was interested in, I guess it was the period with your second NEA partnership, the early 1980s.
Yeah.
Really seemed to be this important, coincides with this important kind of real big first wave of personal computing.
That's right.
You know, you were in it a little bit before with Apple, certainly
Right.
as early as you could get into it.
That's right.
But this seemed to be the real big wave. I was
That's right.
wondering if there were other investors, other people who you saw around who really got what was happening with personal computing.
Oh, yeah, I
the
did.
way that you
John Doerr.
did. Oh, he was.
Yeah, John was very pronounced in that area.
Mm-hmm.
He and I were on 3 or 4 boards together, and but John is, perfect in that environment, and there are others too. They were awfully good.
Was it? I know today, when I'm in my various readings, I'll often see a number of venture firms or venture partnerships making investments together. Was that also the case
All the way through.
from the very beginning
Yep.
of your involvement?
We, as I said, Arthur wasn't really a member of the Old Boys Club, and so I came out of that not being a member of the club, really kind of thing. But I didn't ever try to necessarily change that one way or the other. I sort of let nature take its course.
Right.
And but I developed a lot of professional friendships and have been involved in many projects with a lot of other VCs. And
Right.
enjoyed most of them.
And I suppose it'd be like any other activity. You find people you enjoy working with,
Right.
who are sympathetic or work
Right.
similarly, and
Right.
yeah, work with them again. Yeah.
And I was asked to be the president and chairman of the NVCA.
Oh.
I was doing that, and I was the president of the Western Association of Venture Capitalists. So I always took my responsibilities pretty broadly. So I know you wanted to talk about 1 or 2
Well,
companies.
I did. There was one that I thought was.
I'm unfortunately going to have to leave in about 10 minutes. I could.
Oh, okay.
Is that all right?
Whatever you
Yeah.
need to do is,
Okay.
of course, fine. Well, gosh, I'll have to really then be selective about which one.
Well, I can come down another time.
Well, we'll do that, but maybe I'll
Okay.
just ask you.
Sure.
I was looking at 10 minutes.
I know.
Yeah,
I know, it's
Got to
bad.
pick my question
I know.
correctly. Well, one thing that I did notice is that if the figures I dug up are correct, it seemed that this is looking across all the various NEA partnerships, that from the start to 1990, about 25 of the firms that you had invested in had an IPO. So that's over more than 12 years.
Yeah.
Then in the following 6 years, 1990 to 1996,
Right.
there were 74 IPOs.
That's right.
And I was just really curious about that huge difference, the huge acceleration.
Right. Well, we're, it's a product of the stock market in part. And also we had been deploying more sizable amounts of capital.
Oh.
So it was really a combination of the two that fueled that increase. We now have had 304 IPOs since we started. 304 IPO, I think that's correct. Excuse me, wait a second. 204 IPOs, 324 companies be acquired. That's it. 530 or so exits altogether.
I get, and now that makes sense to me, because maybe if it's a very small firm, the more likely outcome is an acquisition of it.
That's right.
And then you have to get to a certain kind
Right.
of size where it makes sense to do an IPO.
So we've had about 60% acquisitions, 40% IPOs.
Okay, that perfectly explains it, because that would track the increase in size
Right.
of the funds.
Last year we had 20, I think we had 26 exits.
Wow. Well, I also compiled a list of the company, the 8 companies that NEA brought from kind of the startup to $1 billion by 1999. And I wanted to talk about, maybe next time we could talk about, all of these companies, but one that stuck out to me as a little bit of a departure was ImmuneX, which was a very important firm. I wondered
great.
if
You from Seattle?
no,
No.
no. But it seemed in terms of the other ones that I was looking at,
Yeah.
It was biotech, a very important biotech company, different area. Was that an outlier in the early period for you?
Well, we didn't have teams until NEA 4.
Okay.
And so I was able to roam. And I always have liked the medical practice side of things. And there's only one way to learn, and that's to jump in the middle of the pool. And with respect, for example, there was a company called Advanced Cardiovascular Systems. That we were the largest shareholder. John Simpson was the MD who ran it. We merged it into Eli Lilly. Never went public, but I was involved in that. I was involved in, that was all catheter technology. And I was involved in 5 other companies in catheter technology solving different kinds of problems. And so basically there was a whole run of good things that all happened. They were all acquisitions. Then in the case of ImmuneX, it was the first pure cancer therapeutic company in the United States. And had great technology coming out of the University of Washington, a man named Hood. And they had a couple of one particularly great guy as an inventor up there, and a very competent CEO. The answer is it was a bit of an outlier in that they were doing something very revolutionary, and interleukins, it was called. And I mean, I went to school on that. I was involved in that company for 9 years.
Wow.
And I learned as much as I could possibly learn about biotechnology through the eyes of that company, and it made me a better participant going forward. And so one of the things I love about the venture business is the fact that it's lifelong learning.
Did you then do more biotechnology after that?
So my partners, after we became organized in meds and tech, they couldn't figure out where I belonged. And so I remember them telling me, they said, Dick, you actually have the best record among all the partners in the med side of things, but you don't really know what you're doing, do you? And I said, not really. I can learn, but I don't know. And so that I just became aware of what questions to ask the people who were coming in and asking for capital in that kind of in the biotech, biopharma area. We now have a fantastically strong team in that area, headed by a man named David Mott.
So as a firm, you really went into it after
really
that.
big time, and we now have a really great person running services too, and then we actually added another dimension to that because we brought in some people who were very knowledgeable in publicly held biotech companies. Biotech companies have a lifeline that's longer than 2 venture capital firms, conventional venture capital firms. If they were 5-year or 7-year partnerships, and they last, as long as 20 years in the development stage. So we brought in 2 people who had been involved in, and were very good people and could do multiple talents. But so we actually carved out a pool of capital within our partnership to invest in public abandoned firms that were in the biotech area.
Oh, how about that?
That's worked out very well.
To pick up where other people didn't have.
Where they abandoned them and they were in stage 2. In the big, you don't really do anything to get beyond stage 3, clinical trials.
Right.
And so it was, it's worked out really well. But that's another added dimension. As I said, that's another advantage of size. You can specialize within the context of the partnership in small doses in areas that are where there's awful lot of promise.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, we call it dynamic capital allocation. That's how we like to, when we're raising a partnership, we like to say what areas we're going to focus on that we haven't done before or haven't done as much of before, and vice versa.
I guess, well, I'll burden you with one last question, maybe, and it was just about, I was thinking about this evolution back to software. I have software on the mind. I
compliment you on all the study you've done of this.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Not easy to do that.
It's a lot to try and make sense of.
It is.
With the software, this hardware and software together, software is a packaged good on its own to, we'll just call it software as a service.
Right.
I could almost think of it as maybe that software as a service is an endpoint, because I can't really envision a scenario where it goes back.
You can't.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think what's happening is that it's evolving, thanks to the internet. It's evolving to apps and more than apps, platforms. We're interested in platforms. And that's where you get to next in your evolution of things.
After software as a service.
Yeah, it's at least one branch goes that direction.
Okay.
And
what would be an example of a platform as you see it?
Okay, well, I would say, I think Google is a platform. I mean, it really is. I can give you a lot of examples.
Okay, but one of
Facebook is a platform.
Okay, I understand what you're meaning by that.
Those are both major platforms.
Absolutely.
I mean, they really are fantastic.
Kind of environments within which people do all sorts of different things. Yeah,
that's what it is. That's what a good platform is an ecosystem.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's almost as a kind of an expansion of software as a service. Yeah.
Right.
Fascinating.
So I've been lucky enough to be involved in 11 companies that have gone to the $1 billion number, including Zoom in that one. It just is getting acquired right now, by the way.
I haven't.
PayPal.
Oh.
It's a great fit. And as eBay, PayPal going opposite directions, PayPal has $7 billion war chest. They just took $1 billion of it and gave it to Zoom. And I think that's a great fit.
And Zoom is one of your endeavors.
Right. And so I'm still on 7 companies for NEA. The one I hope is going to be the most important of all time for me is still in that group of companies. It's called Tri-Alpha Energy.
Oh, you mentioned it earlier. Yeah.
It's the one that is, this is going to, anybody who reads this this will happen after it's known, because we've kept a strict lid on the company from a public standpoint. But we achieved what we call steady state is one way of putting it. It's a fusion company.
Oh my gosh, if that works,
That's what I'm
then
talking about.
yeah.
And we achieved, you know, positive net energy out on a continual basis. And
Well, all my fingers and toes will be crossed for
this
that
is-
one, because
this,
that's,
I told my partners, this happened on June 23rd. I said, this could be, and we've proven how long. And the other thing we have to do is how hot.
mm-hmm.
And so this is using magnetic confinement, using proton boron as our material, which under temperature and pressure converts into hydrogen under temperature and pressure into helium, and then under temperature and pressure into helium-3, and that's what tri-alpha stands for.
Okay.
And we've had the entire academic community saying this couldn't happen. We have our scientific advisory team is 8 people. 4 of them are Nobel laureates. We have a fellow with us, by the way, Arno Penzias, who
Oh,
got the
yeah,
Nobel
I
for
know that name.
validating the back end of Einstein's Big Bang Theory in '76.
Right.
Ran Bell Labs. He's here in San Francisco. And he was the one who got us into this, and he asked me to join him on this endeavor. And so I said, you know, look, I did well in chemistry and physics, but I'm a normal guy.
Yeah.
And he kept on insisting, and so I said, okay, I'll do it on 2 bases. Number 1 is you give me a tutoring test in plasma physics, because that's what this is all about.
Yeah.
And secondly, no tests.
Yeah.
So that's what it is, and but it's incredibly exciting.
Oh,
And I would say it's, well, this comes to pass, and I don't want to spoil it by saying anything about it, but it could be as important as recombinant DNA
Sure.
and as important as the invention of the semiconductor.
Oh yeah.
Those
I mean,
2
it's
things. I think
been-
it's in that league,
fusion certainly,
fusion.
absolutely would be.
And it has so many ramifications. And Arno Penzias thinks that one of the real uses is going to be for desalinization on a mass level, very inexpensively. Our cost is 5 cents per kilowatt hour.
That's great.
It's really, coal is 4 cents without remediation. So we really have all our fingers and toes crossed. Now we have to
yeah.
prove enter the temperature. But we're talking with utilities, and we have a guide. We know where we're going. We have 295 issued patents, 129 on file.
Wow.
And it's really a serious deal. So I'm really,
That's very hopeful. I mean,
Yeah.
that's been such a long dream of getting to fusion that
that's right.
you know, any step closer is fabulous news.
You'll see something in the 4th quarter of this year in Science Magazine.
Ah, well,
My guess. And the other fellow who's involved in this, who I think the world of, is Ray Rothrock.
I'm
Ray
not
Rothrock.
I'm not
he
familiar
used
with
to be
him.
he was with Venrock,
Okay.
and he's left, and he's on his own. He's running a company called Red Seal. He's a great guy. And he was a nuclear engineer in the Navy.
Oh, so right
Navy
in his
sub,
area.
Rickover.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, thank you so much.
Oh,
This is
thank
great.
you.
You're
Yeah,
right.
thanks for staying
Yeah.
a little bit
Yeah,
extra. Yeah.